let's get started. All right, so as I said, my name is Lior. I am a creative copywriter at Perimeter 81, and I will be hosting this wonderful conversation between Boaz, our Senior Director of Product Marketing, and Jenny Radcliffe, our wonderful guest. Jenny is known as the People Hacker, a world-renowned social engineer hired to bypass security systems through a mixture of psychology, con artistry, cunning, and Gil. Jenny has received many industry awards and has most recently been inducted into the prestigious InfoSec Hall of Fame in 2022. Amazing, Jenny. And by the way, Jenny's best-selling book, People Hacker: Confessions of a Burglar for Hire, has recently been released. So you can catch Jenny afterwards and ask her all about that. So welcome, guys. And I guess we'll just dive straight into it and start talking about ransomware. So before we, get deep into ransomware, I think it's important to understand, a few statistics about how ransomware can affect businesses. These statistics, the average cost of ransomware attacks, if it's, being paid to the attackers or if it's, afterthought of things that need to happen, that's a pretty big sum for any company to have to pay. 71% of companies that have been affected, that is, almost three out of every four companies, which is not a small number, and 75% of SMBs that won't survive a ransomware attack. You don't want this to happen to you. Obviously, this is, something that people talk about, but, we really want to get into the details of how this happens, why this happens, and how we can avoid it. So
just these statistics are amazing, right? And Jenny kind of being the representative of the human side of things. A company that goes out of business, just think about all these employees, right, losing their jobs. I just think about that part of it, and it's crazy. And of course, the business impact. So unbelievably high number there.
Yeah, I mean, when we see stats like this, it's so alarming. And, there's more you can go. If you really deep dive into the impact of ransomware, the stats just keep on coming. But I think one thing that's really difficult to quantify, even if a company recovers from a ransomware attack, is just the damage it does for the team and for morale. And just like you said, Baz, that brand damage as well. So ransomware isn't just the financial cost. It's the exposure. It's what it does both to the external view of an organization, as well as what it does for the sort of level of trust and communication and everything within a company. So, when we see stats like this, and alarming as they are, what it doesn't really show us, and what's hard to show in any sort of form, is really that human cost as well. And that's something that, we're going to get into a little bit, I think. But yeah, I always say, I think that this is awful as you see them, but then there's so much behind those initial stats as well. There's a bigger human story.
Right. So I think we can all agree that you don't really want to be on the losing side of a ransomware attack. So when we ask ourselves, how this happens, why this happens, I think one of the main challenges is really, how ransomware attacks exploit bad decisions of people in an organization, in the workplace. Jenny, I'd love to hear, your thoughts about the psychological side of these supposedly bad decisions in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, we said bad decisions tongue in cheek when we were looking at this because, it's not that this is a matter of blame, right? It's the fact is social engineering is used to bring ransomware and other problems into organizations. And what social engineering is deliberately targeting people and the things that make us human. The fact that we sometimes get tired, we sometimes make mistakes, we sometimes click on a link or open an attachment or do any of those things that we shouldn't really do. And so social engineering is designed and is deliberately targeted for people to make those mistakes. It's very difficult for human beings to always make the right decisions. And that doesn't mean it's a bad decision. It's just a human decision. So we say bad decisions in as much as I think we blame ourselves, organizations blame themselves, and particularly individuals we've got this tendency to think, oh, I did something bad, I did the wrong thing. But number one, you're being targeted by professional social engineers, professional criminals who are using this to try and catch you out and really putting a lot of time and effort into doing so. But also, it's just a human thing. Sometimes if a human being has something presented to them, we just don't always make the right choice. And I think that's really how a lot of this malware, a lot of these problems get into organizations and get onto our networks. But it's just inevitable if humans have to make decisions that sometimes it's not the right decision. But that doesn't make us wrong or bad people or stupid. It just makes us human and targeted.
Right. So I think, as in a way that we're all trying to avoid these decisions, bad or not bad, we're not going to define them, I guess, at this point. How would we go about solving? There's obviously a solution for this, and I think it's a two-part solution. So the first part being education, limiting these decisions. Jenny, I'd love to hear your thoughts and Boaz as well.
Well, if we start with this one, because I know Boaz is going to talk a little bit about the technology and what we can do. But I think one of the problems is that we do tend to say education. The security industry say, we just educate. But in and of itself, that's just one word. It's just a term. What we need to do is target education properly. And that's not something that's necessarily an easy thing to do. As much as the threat is constantly evolving and moving, we need to match that with constantly evolving and moving how we train people to look out for these things. And there's a huge part that technology can play in this. And as I say, we'll hand over to Boaz to talk a bit more about this. But there's a few things I always say when people ask about this. How do we limit these bad decisions, as we're calling them? Well, the first thing is obviously as few as possible, a few times as possible that someone has to make a choice between, is this safe? Is this secure? And if it isn't, that's the first thing. And we'll speak more to that in a minute. But I also don't subscribe to the idea that we always say in security, we don't sell anything on fear. And we shouldn't. That's true. But what we do have to do is show people and tell people the extent of the risk. So we have to treat people like grown-ups. We have to be realistic and say, we're talking to you about this because this is the extent of what can happen. And as we saw in the previous slide, it's huge, right? This is not a small issue. So the first thing I'd say when we're talking about education is we do have to get people across the real problem and explain why. And I was thinking just when we were waiting to come on live, it's the difference between saying to someone, don't run on the bridge in case you slip and fall, or then saying to someone, don't run on the bridge in case you slip and fall because there's shark-infested waters underneath. Right? It's not that we're trying to frighten them. It's just getting people across the extent of the problem. And I think this is a similar thing. And to do that, we have to educate people in a constant way and lots of different ways of doing that. So it's not just about saying education, giving them some presentation they can click through and that's it. It's a constant conversation. And I think that's really the only way that from the human side, we can try and just get people to understand this and maybe limit a little bit how many times they make the wrong choice.
Yeah, and I think definitely. Yep, go for it, Boaz.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, we're talking about education and ways to kind of avoid this. I was kind of wondering, Jenny, a lot of companies out there do these attack simulations, right? They're send so-called phishing emails to employees trying to see what they can kind of catch and use that kind of technique to educate people. What do you think about that kind of tactic? Is that fair game?
Do you know, I think phishing simulations and training about phishing emails has a place. And I think the problem is, well, there's a couple of issues with it though. The first problem is I think people think a phishing simulation sometimes is all they need to do, because phishing emails are a huge attack vector. People are the target for those. It's problematic if it's not done properly. So when we've produced phishing email scripts in the past, What we don't do is say something like, people are going to be fired. Click the link if you want more information. Or there's a bonus. Click the link to find out. It's got to be something that's relatively not harmless, but it's got to be something that isn't deceptive with that team, because you don't want the team to say, well, I've learned a little bit about phishing, but now I don't trust the comms from the company. So how you construct a phishing email for a test needs to be very well thought out, because, and we're going to get onto it later, I'm sure, because the culture of security within a company needs to be one of trust. People need to be able to come to you and talk to you if they see a problem. And they're not going to do that if A, those emails are in some way harmful to them and could be construed as such, and B, if there's no lesson from that email, right? So what, you've clicked on the wrong link. It shouldn't be that now we're going to punish you with training or whatever it is. What it should be is, this is why this was written this way, and this is why we're doing it again. Keep getting back to the reason behind it. So I think it does have a place if it's done properly. Now, that said, I think a lot of organizations think if we put some phishing simulation in place, then we've covered that. That's the human side done, and we've educated people. But of course, that's only a tiny part of what people need to understand and look out for. So it's part of an awareness suite of products, if you like, but it's got to be done properly. It's got to encourage conversations and engender trust with the security team, and it's not the only solution. And I think that's my view of phishing emails, really.
Got it. All right, thanks.
All right. So the tech, yeah.
Right, the tech side of things, right? So obviously we want to do our best to avoid any kind of risk, based on education. Obviously avoidance, right, is always the best way to go about anything. But we do know that these social engineering techniques are getting more sophisticated, and you're always going to find that right wording that's going to get someone excited or intrigued, or is going to get them to click, right? So we need to have a safety net, if you will, that will be able to protect our workforce in case that happens. And this is really where technology comes in. And there's a wide set of tools that organizations can use to help avoid infection by ransomware, by malware in general, and then also tools that will help us stop the propagation of malware throughout the network. And these are kind of the two main ways we want to go about this. So prevention, as we said, if we can educate an employee to not click on anything and not fall victim, that's great. But if that happens, what we want to do is try to prevent infection. And the way we do this, right, if we have the user that is clicking on a link or trying to access a website that's compromised, what we want to do is use a solution. In this case, we can use a web filtering solution that will look at the URLs, the domains that the user is trying to access. And if that appears in a database of compromised websites that are known to have malware, that are known to be used as command and control, and we'll talk more about this in a moment, for botnets, and any other type of malicious type of website, then web filtering, which should be constantly updated and make sure that it covers as many malicious sites as can be found. And this is where a lot of organizations cooperate. And if one organization identifies a site as being malicious, that is updated through several different public databases, and then these, together with private databases that many organizations have, are used to effectively block the request. So even if a user does click on a link that would take them to a phishing site or would initiate a downloading of malware, we can block those using web filtering. Now, in some cases, the request might reach a website that is not yet updated in any of the databases. And what we want to be able to do is actually scan the downloaded content. And for this, we use a malware protection solution, which scans all the files that are being downloaded from the website to the user in order to identify if it is malicious content. It might be ransomware, it might be any kind of malware out there, could be keyloggers, could be a bot that will be nested on the user device waiting for a command to take action. What we want to do is scan all of those files that are being downloaded as part of the browsing experience and make sure that if anything suspicious is identified, we block that download. And of course, anytime we block the request for the download, we let the user know what happened and that they have in fact are likely being targeted for an attack. So this is the prevention part of things. If there's anything here, Jenny, that you want to
I just wanted to ask you, Boaz, when if the user clicks and it gets to the web filter and the web filter blocks it, what happens? Do they get a notification that says this is blocked because it might be dangerous?
Exactly. They get a notification saying you're trying to access a site that is known to be malicious or violates the company policy. You can actually each organization can set their own message, can define what actually will be written, but it is a message telling them that they have violated a policy or they're trying to reach a malicious site, and therefore their organization has blocked the request. And if they think it's wrongful, it's a wrongful blocking, they can reach their IT team and ask them to give them access to it.
This is what I was talking about earlier. It's so important that we tell them and that they can speak to the security team and say, to the IT and say, look, why is this an issue? I need this. This is why I like this so much, because it fits so well with that idea of it's not just that they can't access it and they're going to click and click. You need that explanation and you need that next step if they want to challenge it or talk about it, don't you? Because otherwise it's a security department just saying no, when we kind of want to get away from that lack of communication. So
absolutely,
I was just interested in what happened.
Absolutely. We really have to keep users informed and not frustrate them with thinking that something's not working, something's broken. Absolutely, completely agree with that. So we talked about preventing infection, but in some cases, malware might slip through web filtering and might slip through even the malware protection side of things and might infect the device. And also malware might not have accessed the device through web browsing, right? It might have been an employee that put a discount key, right, a flash drive into their computer, which they maybe connected home, and that computer was infected. But however way the end user device gets infected, that really becomes dangerous because that can then propagate across the organization, right? And that specific access to specific employee's device, it doesn't probably, won't create a lot of harm. But if it is able to propagate and reach, the organization's databases or SaaS applications or any kind of application running in database or in the cloud, that's where it can wreak havoc. That's where the ransomware attack actually takes place. They need to take that step and reach the really important, the jewels of the crown, if you will, of the organization. So even if a user has been infected, what we want to do is contain it as much as we can. So one way we contain it is if this is a malware that communicates, and typically that is what happens with ransomware attacks and other types of malware, is that they communicate. They're downloaded. They're kind of sleepers on your device, and once a day or a couple of times a day, however way they're programmed, they will reach out to a command and control center that manages all of those bots that belong to that network, and requesting requesting the command of what do I do now? What's happening next? Do you want me to infect anything? Do you want me to encrypt the disk where I am and wait, and demand ransomware? So the command and control really is what activates it. And if we're able to block that, and again, this is where we can actually use web filtering again, which can also identify command and control. I mentioned this before. So even if the user device has been infected, but we identify traffic arriving or being sent from that malware on the device, trying to communicate and get its activation command from the command and control center, we can block that. And that will effectively contain that malware and render it useless in most cases, unless there's a timeout and it acts. But in most cases, it will communicate and try to get that activation command. So that's one way we can contain malware even if it has infected the user device. We have additional tools that help us. And if the user is trying to access the cloud data center or the on-prem data center where applications are, again, if they're connecting to these locations and the malware uses that connection, to traverse and reach those locations, that's where the big risk gap is. So we can take a lot of other steps and use other tools to help us deal with this. One of them is the device posture check. And this is a check. This is a module that runs on the user device and makes sure that the device meets the organization policies. And this can include a lot of things. This can make sure that the latest OS version with the latest security patches is deployed. It can make sure that there's an antivirus running on the device. It can make sure that a certain registry key exists on the device, that a specific program is running, an additional security program that might be required. So there's a long set of checks that can be defined, and only devices that fully complying with the defined security posture for those devices is actually granted access to the organization. So that goes a long way in reducing the risk, because in many cases, if you have the right antivirus, you have the right tools, that device will likely not, there's much lower likelihood it'll get infected in the first place. If these security measures are not met, we will not let that user connect. And that takes us really a long way in protecting the network. Then we have context-aware access control. So we can make sure that users are connecting from the right geographic location, right? If this is a user based in the UK, and suddenly we're seeing that user with those credentials trying to connect from China or Russia or any other country that kind of is known to have a high level of illegal web activity, that can raise a red flag, and that can also, make sure that we block that request until we understand with that user why are they suddenly connecting from that location. And also time-based, right? If this is a user that works 9 to 5 and suddenly on the weekend at night, there's access request to sensitive information, that again can raise a red flag, and the system can block that request until we understand why that happens. So again, that's another tool that we use to contain that malware from spreading across the organization. Lastly is zero trust network access. And we'll talk about zero trust a bit more, but zero trust network access really is kind of the new VPN, if you will. It's a tool that enables users to connect to enterprise resources, but it segments the network in a very granular way into microsegments where users only get access to the specific applications and resources they should have access to. So if we have an employee in the HR department, they should not have access to the source code that the R&D uses. So we can limit those and really slice the organization's assets and resources really granularly and make sure that it's a need to access only methodology that we're using. This is really what zero trust network access is about. In this case, even if users is compromised, the extent of damage that that user can, with a malware in that case, can wreak in the organization is very limited. They will have very limited access only to what that user has been given access to.
Great.
Okay, so moving. Yep.
I think we're seeing, a really interesting, zero trust environment. You spoke a lot about zero trust, and I think, Jenny, you spoke about it earlier, implementing zero trust as a culture or, as a way of doing things in an organization is not something that you do with the click of a button, and I think there's a lot of psychology behind how you make zero trust and what it really means, fit your company. So how would you go about that, Jenny?
It's so interesting because just to talk about that context aware access control. It's one of those things that shows you just how much technology and the human side can be so similar, and they mirror each other and complement each other. Because from a social engineering point of view, if we're watching an organization, and I'm speaking to Boaz now because I know that you're going to agree with this, but when we're watching people, one of the things that we watch for is out of pattern behavior, right? Patterns are very important. When someone does something that's not to pattern, either their own pattern or the pattern of the organization, that's a potential red flag, and it's something that we watch for. And there was a time I was watching a firm for a long time doing surveillance, and just couldn't understand where this leak was coming from. I'm sorry, this is just a little story, but I'm just going to say, and this one isn't in the book either, so this is a freebie. And there was just this one guy that was going into work early and coming out really late. And it was the type of firm where you didn't do that. It was in a culture where you didn't do that. You work exactly when you're meant to be in. And for a long time, it was so suspicious. And it was suspicious because it was different to everyone else. And it was different to what he used to do. And what I noticed was when he went in, he had a light briefcase. But when he came out, the briefcase was really heavy. And he was actually taking paper copies of some IPR. So it just, I love the context-aware stuff because yes, sometimes there's a reason for things, but it's what we watch for as well. And it's just the harmony. It's strange, the connections we find between tech and people sometimes. It just caught my eye. But yeah, I mean, when we talk about the zero trust side of things, you can't just throw money at these situations. It has to, and you can't just buy something. It has to be something like this that's intelligent, right? That's thinking all the time and changing all the time. And when we put zero trust in, there is challenges. And it's because particularly if we have to take away what people had access to, so legacy systems, legacy programs, even if they never use something, people really hate things being taken away that they had before. It's a cognitive bias called loss aversion. We value something that we have, even if we never use it, more than something we can gain. So what we have to do, again, is work with the human side as well as the tech. And it's about what we spoke about before, Boaz, isn't it? It's that whole idea of this is the solution, this is what it's going to do, this is why we need it. And then talking to people about why there's going to be a change. Because otherwise they see all the problems and they don't see this as an opportunity to really talk to the security teams and talk about the way business is evolving and the way security is evolving. If we miss out the discussion piece at the beginning, then all it is just a problem. It's a barrier. And I don't think that's the way security wants to be seen anymore. We want to be seen as an enabler, as a department that uses good technology, good tools to make everyone safe, but not necessarily just getting in the way of people doing their job for no reason. Right?
Right. Absolutely. And security is a balancing act because you absolutely have to enable the business, right? You can't have, add security measures and have things not work. The business is there first and foremost to be a business and to be successful and meet its goals. So it's really a balancing act of how much, security measure, how many measures and how, to what extent do you go to add them with minimum impact to the organization. And I think, when we talk about zero trust network access and that segmentation, we really want to communicate that to employees. And before we implement it, we want to have those discussions, right? Not after the fact, but before we deploy such a system, talk to the different teams, make sure that we agree on which applications, people in the team should have and which they shouldn't have. And come to an agreement before you flip that switch and enforce it, and people don't know what happened, right? You want to have that conversation. You want to communicate it. You want people to know in advance, and when that happens, they are prepared, and nobody's surprised, and nobody feels like anything was taken away from them without thought or consideration. It's absolutely a process that needs to be communicated across the organization.
Yeah, I think, and the security teams, for security teams listening to this, we need to see these things as an opportunity, because I think we're all aware of the potential barriers to introducing anything new into an organization, and particularly zero trust.
Right.
But we need to see it as an opportunity. This is a great opportunity to see really what people really think about what they're using. I mean, what and almost, and this sounds cynical, but it's an opportunity. Why do certain people object to losing certain programs that they don't need? Right now, I'm not saying that everyone who objects to getting something taken away from them is a potential insider threat. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that we just need to be really mindful of why, the example you gave, someone in HR has got the source code. Why would someone object to that being taken away, right? So it kind of gives us this whole opportunity for a consultation piece throughout the organization of what people value, what they think those programs and that those applications are for, and really where their head's at in terms of the security side. So I really think that it's not just about introducing great technology to help us be more secure. It's an opportunity to really bring security to the table in terms of the, holistic organization, like really get our eyes on what everyone's focused on and cares about. And I think for me, if that's done properly, it turns something that's seen as a barrier into something that's a real conversation piece and enabler, and good tool for the security team as a cultural asset as well as the technology.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Right. So I think that kind of brings us to try and understand what is the right way to adopt these tools, because these are, there are different tools that are used, different products that need to be used, and organizations are sometimes kind of struggling with what is the right way to start, how do these different tools play nicely together, and what tools can really match the demands and needs that organizations have today. So to kind of get a better understanding of this, I'd like to kind of talk about what security used to be and how it evolved and made things more complicated. Right. So in the past, all employees went to the office. Very few employees worked, out of the office. The sales force maybe occasionally connecting remotely, but employees, by and large, were connecting from the office to the on-prem data center, which was where the applications were. That was it. That was how an organization network was built. And what happened is, a few things. First of all, the digital transformation and the shift to cloud, right, closely related trends that started moving a lot of these enterprise applications from that on-prem data center to different cloud environments. And that can be the public cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, and such, and SaaS applications, right, Salesforce, Slack, and so BrightTalk is an example as well of an application, SaaS application that organizations use. And now suddenly you need to connect these employees to additional locations, right? Which kind of complicated the network. And traditionally, employees that needed to connect to enterprise resources connected to a VPN on the on-prem data center. And after connecting to that data center, then they had to connect, from there to the cloud, creating backhauling traffic, that trombone effect that really added latency and affected experience. Also needing to add more firewalls, and things started to get complicated. The web itself. Now, obviously, the web, the internet isn't part of the organizational network. However, that's where the risk is coming from, right? That's where we kind of started our discussion today. That's where malware mostly will arrive from, is the web. And that's where organizations need to consider it. Typically, you want a secure web gateway solution that will do, they'll perform that functionality that we talked about, web filtering, malware protection. And that typically was deployed in branch offices because that's where employees were. And kind of the last step in our evolvement is, of course, the shift to remote work, right? COVID obviously accelerated and took organizations from zero work from home to 100% work from home pretty much overnight. And that created this whole new use case where, again, remote users needed to connect to physical location branch offices, to connect to the SWIGs and the VPNs, and only then go to the cloud and the web. It just created a very complicated, very inefficient, and very unsecure network, for organizations, and really added a lot of risk. Now, to add to this complexity, right, you need to manage all of these tools, which means you need a lot of different management consoles, one for the VPN, one for the firewalls in the cloud, And for the secure web gateways, and if you have several firewalls in the cloud, AWS and Azure, for example, you need to manage those differently. So we get this cobweb of inefficient connectivity and complexity, too many tools, right, and in too many locations, too many screens to manage it from, and too many networking routes that you need to go through to get things done. And this is really what we want to avoid today. We want solutions that do not create all that complexity, but still provide us the tools that we need to secure organizations from the risk we talked about. So this is kind of where cloud-based converged networking security solutions started coming into the picture and replacing those old solutions, right? Instead of those old VPNs that did not have that network segmentation we talked about, organizations are moving to cloud-based ZTNAs that are much more secure and much better performing being in the cloud and not requiring these complex routing through physical locations. Firewalls that are deployed, firewall in the cloud instead of the different firewalls in the different locations. And the secure web gateway, right, which helps us protect against malware, accessing malicious site and downloading malware. That is also running in the cloud instead of the different branch offices. So what we actually get is one management system that manages all of these solutions, and these solutions are actually part of one single secure network platform, right? So you get one solution that performs all of the different functionalities you need to protect users and the network, which is easy to manage, and really you don't really need to deploy anything because it's delivered as a cloud SaaS service, which means you do not deploy any appliances or virtual appliances. You just connect all the users and your resources to that existing deployed service, and you're ready to go within a few hours. You can get all the connectivity and the security that a modern organization network needs.
So this very interesting. I think, in addition to what we said about, having education and having tech, with this sort of, I guess, easy to use solution, we could say that the tech is helping to educate, the team, the security team, on how is the right way to approach it, because you're giving them the right tools and sort of educating them, to know what is the right approach or what is a good approach for them to take to prevent the next attack.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true.
Awesome. All right, great. So I'd like to, sum it up. We're getting close, and we have a few questions here in the chat that I think people are waiting for answers. So, if we could start with a few of, your final key takeaways, if you will, for our great audience that's been here today.
Yeah, I mean, I think, these are some of my key takeaways, I guess, predominantly. And it's just that you can't educate employees away from being targets. We can only make it slightly harder for attackers. And that's why I say, defense, you have to have technology as well. I think sometimes when I am interviewed or I do panels, people think I'm saying it's all about the people. And of course it is all about the people, but technology is part of protecting people. The better the technology is, whether it's, stopping us clicking, stopping us reaching those bad sites, or opening the emails, the attachments, or whether it's actually containing it, as Boaz explained so well earlier, that's all part of it, because the truth is humans are always going to be fooled at some point by someone or something. We have to expect our users to occasionally click on the wrong link or do the wrong thing. So that's why I say here, you have to have technology as well as working with people. It's never one or the other. It's both together. And that means that you really do have to have the right technology as well. We can't just throw anything at it and expect it to work. It has to be something like this that's designed with the users and the team. So you've got great tech, but it's tech that communicates, it's tech that evolves, and it's something that's easy to implement because things move so fast. And as Boaz said just now, the workforce is mobile. That's what it's going to be. That's what we're always going to be. Effectively, the perimeter is the people. So we've got to have something that moves and evolves with that, just like we all moved and evolved, and suddenly so many of us work remotely these days. So that's why I say, to be effective, you have to have them both together. It's important to educate, vital, but you need the tech as well. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. Boaz?
Right. So, deploying the right security solution can help protect from infection and spreading ransomware. And we kind of took a look at this. Right. We want to have that safety net, and if you have the right security solution in place, it can help us, prevent infection. We always want to prevent, right? It's true for cybersecurity. It's true for healthcare. It's true pretty much anywhere. Prevention is always the best move, and we're able to do that. After if education has failed us, we want to have the technology to do this. And if the technology has failed us, we want to be able to at least contain malware and prevent it from spreading throughout the organization. And it's really important to adopt the right tools that enable to do this. Zero trust is a big concept. That's been around for a while. It really received a boost after the Biden administration signed the bill requiring government organizations to adopt it. But we've seen adoption really rise even in the private sector. I think we understand it, organizations understand it, and security leaders understand that zero trust is a framework of technologies and best practices that really goes a long way in helping them secure their organizations. And zero trust is definitely something that I encourage all of you IT and security leaders out there to look into, to get a better understanding of, and specifically to learn what tools can help you implement it, easily in your organizations. You want to, you don't want to adopt something that's very complicated. You want to look at tools that are very effective yet simple. So you want to find that balance. Again, both human and technical security efforts are dynamic. They change over time. And I think, the education needs to evolve, the technology needs to evolve. And, we know this, especially since the perpetrators, right, the people we're defending against, because malware and ransomware and pretty much all of that activity doesn't just happen, right? It's not like a disease that spreads throughout the world, somehow it happens, nobody knows. People are actually behind this. Could be nation states, could be criminal organizations, could be hacktivists. There are many different people with different interests, and they continuously evolve and become more sophisticated, and that requires us to be more sophisticated and the technology to become more sophisticated, but yet still easy to implement and use. And I think that is still key.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a few great questions here. We're going to try to keep it quick. So let me just get you guys on screen so we can have you answer the questions. All right, so the first question here is for you, Jenny. What do you say are the key things to remember when working with people in terms of security?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I think I've sort of said it really, but just it's worth repeating. People need to know the reason. All of us who work in security, we're obsessed with security, right? And we talk about all the time, and we understand all the reasons to put the tech in place, to put the education. But we need to understand that this is not their job. This is not necessarily the people we work with. It's not their passion. They're experts in other things. So the important thing is always to give them that why, always to talk to them about the reasons that we're doing these things. And I think really to treat them like grown-ups as well. There's this whole fear. You say, we mustn't sell on fear, and fear is a bad thing. It is, but this can be scary, right? So, we're not selling products or services on fear, but it's important to treat that audience with respect. And to do that, you can't treat them like children and not tell them the extent of this. But the important thing, I think, is the why. And I think the other thing is this conversation about security in organizations, because we need our colleagues, our users, to be our eyes and ears and to be alert to the threats. We need to hand that conversation back to them. And that's why implementing new technology can be such a great opportunity to talk to our colleagues who are not in the industry. So we need them to have the conversation amongst themselves. And one of the things I always say is make sure that at team meetings and at line management level that we talk about security as well as all the other things that we talk about. Let people bring us their stories of, I fell for this phishing simulation, or I fell for a real phishing attack, or I think I saw something that could be a phishing email, or I heard about this attack in the news, or there's a political move. Boaz mentioned the Biden administration. And the whole thing about recommendations to adopt zero trust. Anything like that, hand it back to the team, right? Because it should be a conversation we lead, not a conversation that only we have. And if we remember those things, they don't cost anything except focus and attention and time. Those are the things that really matter when we work with people, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, having security as part of the conversation, we saw in one of the first slides that it can have a direct effect on the business. So,
Exactly.
Everybody wants to talk about the business and but security has that effect. All right, so let's see what we got here. We have one here for you, Boaz. What kind of threats can malware protection protect from? Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so there's a whole range. We talked about ransomware, which I think probably is the scariest and the one most feared by organizations. But it could be keyloggers, it could be Trojans. There's really a whole plethora of different kinds of malicious content that can be downloaded. What they do have in common is they're all downloaded using files, right? So if it has been downloaded from the internet, it has to be part of the file. And then once you are able to identify patterns within that file, or have the ability, again, advanced tools use also BI capabilities to get a deeper insight into the behavior of the different malwares and how to block them. So the idea is that there's a wide range of them. Some examples that I've given. It's important to have a tool that is able to deal and protect from all different types, not just a specific antivirus tool, for example, or something that specifically targets another type of malware. You need a comprehensive solution.
Perfect. Thank you. I hope that answer was good. All right. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. Jenny, this one is for you. How can we fight social engineering if it's so effective? It's a hopeless task. Ooh, sounds like someone here is feeling overwhelmed.
So I get this question a lot because it feels like I'm saying two things. I'm saying at some point, social engineering will catch us all out, right? We always say there's only two types of companies: those who've been socially engineered and those who don't realize they've already been socially engineered, right? They don't realize it yet. And it's true. It really will get through. It's the thing that's always got through, right? Because humans will always be imperfect, emotional beings that get tired and everything. And I think that's why people ask it, because they say, well, if that's true, what's the point? Why should we try and protect? But it's similar to what Boaz says in terms of the technology, but we can prevent a lot of it through education, through conversation, through a good corporate culture that doesn't focus on blame, but focuses on sharing information. And that, by the way, isn't just with our team. That's with, again, as Boaz said, in terms of the malware and the different groups and APTs that we see out there, it's sharing outside as well. So sharing amongst different businesses, different industries, different countries, sharing information. So we can prevent a lot of it and we can narrow it down and make the target smaller, right? And then we can also limit it in the same way that we can limit with the spread of malware on our networks. We can limit the damage by having people feel able to speak up, by having us report it to the right place, by our security teams being the go-to people in an organization that people go to when they think something has gone wrong, even if it's a false positive, right? Even if they think it was a problem and it was legitimate. So I suppose the question is, do we give up and let the bad guys win, right? And in that case, don't do anything, right? Don't educate anyone. Don't install any technology. Just sit and be a sitting duck, right? Just sit there and wait to be attacked, and you will be. Or do we fight back? And if we fight back, it means that fewer and fewer of these things are getting through. and we make it harder. And then we get on with our day and with our businesses and our lives. And that's really what I always say when people say, is it hopeless? It's not hopeless. You're going to block a lot of it. Do bad things happen despite our best efforts sometimes? Yes, but we can learn from them and go forward. So no, it's not hopeless. It's absolutely worth the fight. And we get on with it. And we do it every day.
Amazing. I'm ready to battle. You got me hyped up here, Jenny. All right, so it looks like we have time for one last one. Boaz, this one is for you. Is the cloud solution you mentioned deployed by customers, or is it offered as a managed service?
So I talked about our solution, Perimeter 81's, and yes, it is a cloud service. It's delivered as a SaaS. That means that we manage all the data centers where all the different security stacks are deployed that carry out the ZTNA, the SWG, firewall as a service, and all of those. We deploy them, we manage them. That means that if a customer, right, if an organization wants to onboard, all they have to do is connect their resources to that existing deployed solution, and they're ready to go. And that's why it's something that can be done within a day in many cases. A lot of our customers deployed within 2 hours their entire network. So it's completely delivered as SaaS, no need to deploy or do any kind of updates or any security patching or anything else by our customers. It's kind of a ready-to-go service that you can start using immediately.
Awesome. That sounds great. All right, so it looks like we're out of time. If you have any more questions, please, we'll be taking the questions from here. You could keep adding them for the next minute or so. We'll be taking the questions from here and putting them in the LinkedIn event where Jenny and Boaz will be answering them via text. So make sure to hop over to LinkedIn, check out the event, see all the questions in there, and Boaz and Jenny will be answering them. So I guess that's it for today. Thank you very much, Jenny, for being with us, for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your stories. I definitely learned a lot. I hope everybody here did as well. Boaz, thank you again for your expertise and walking us through, the whole process. And for everybody who's here, thank you for attending and stay safe out there. I'll see you guys.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Lior. Pleasure having you, Jenny.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.